Good afternoon, and welcome to day 43 of 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer. Amazing stories with Theo Mayer. Today I'm telling a tale from the Alhambra, and it is The Adventures of the Mason. Now in Granada, there lived a Mason who was very poor. He was devoted, a devoted Christian. He prayed to all the saints and observed all the religious holidays and days that there were, and devoted his life to the service of God. But despite all of that, he remained quite poor, to the point where he could barely keep food on the table for his family. He worked, but he prayed more than he worked, and as a result, things went on in that way, little by little, making ends meet. One night, he was already asleep, and there was a knock on his door. And he got up and went to the door, and there was an old priest standing in the doorway. "Yes, how may I help you?" asked the Mason. The Mason said, or the priest said, "I hear you are a very, very talented Mason, and I have an important job that needs doing by someone who is a devoted Christian and honest to boot. Are you that person?" The Mason said, "Yes, maybe I am honest for sure, and I would be happy to have work, so long as I am compensated appropriately." And the priest said, "Oh, yes, you will be, but there is one condition." And the Mason said, "Yes, well, what is that?" And the priest said that you would begin tonight. And the Mason said, "Yes, I can do that. Would you like me to get my tools?" And the old priest said, "Yes, please do." So the Mason returned quickly, having clothed himself in work clothes, with a bucket, a wooden bucket that had his tools in it. And the priest said, "There is one further condition that must be met." And the Mason said, "What is that?" The priest said, "I must cover your eyes for the trip there, lest you know where we are." And the Mason said, "Fine, so be it." The priest had brought a black hood with him, which he covered the Mason's head with. Now it was well after dark, when everyone in Granada had already gone to bed. So no one was stirring. No one saw the two men walking through the streets, the priest leading this man with a hood over his head, a bucket of tools carried by his side. Well, they wended their way through the streets this way and that, and eventually arrived at a door. Mason did not know, but he heard a key turning an old lock. And then he heard the creaking of the door as it opened on its old and well-used hinges. They went in, down some stairs, and when they arrived at a portico, it was more like a center area in the house, the Mason's hood was taken off, and there in front of him was a beautiful old Moorish fountain. It was in the courtyard, and there was open air above. The house was built around this open air courtyard, which was much the style back in those days. Have an open area where things could be grown, and very often a fountain within it. Well, the Mason took in where he was, and the priest said, I need to have, beneath this fountain, I need to have a vault built. Something that could house a couple of bodies, like a tomb. And the mason said, I can do this. Did not question it a bit. And there were materials that the priest had already had brought there. And the mason got started working, taking tile away, and then excavating out a place that would be of suitable size for what the priest had need for. Well, he worked all through the night. And before dusk, while it was still night, the priest came for him again and said, I must take you home. I have a question. Yes, asked the mason. Can you come tomorrow night and finish? The mason said, of course I will, so long as I am paid appropriately. The priest said, that you will be. And so they went to the door, and the mason was hooded once again. Through the streets they went, by a different way than before. And eventually they arrived at the mason's home. The priest took the mason's hand and put within it a gold coin, took the hood off, and made his way home as the mason entered. Now, I will tell you that before the mason entered, they had agreed once again to when the priest would come and when he would work with the mason again. The next night arrived, the appointed time came, the mason was ready, and the priest hooded him again and led him through the streets. It seemed that it was much longer to get to the old priest's home, but eventually they did. And the mason that night finished what was to be done. As he finished, the priest came to him and said, now, I need your help. I need your help to bring the bodies that will be placed inside the vault and entombed. Can you help me with this? The mason said, yes, of course I will. But as he said this, the hair was standing upright on his head. His arms were tingling with anxiety because he thought, this is not going to be pretty. The priest led him into a room, the upper chambers of the home. As they entered, the mason was certain that he was going to see some ghastly scene, some decrepit, rotting away bodies that would need to be put into this vault that he had made. But instead, standing in a corner were 4 portly vases filled with gold coins. Well, the mason carried one by one these very heavy vases to the vault, and 2 on each side he pushed them within. With a bit of work, he made it seem as if nothing had ever happened, cleaned up things, put his tools back into his bucket, and said he was ready. The priest hooded him and took him out, and long they walked before they got to a place where the mason could hear some water flowing. Now here, the priest left him, and he said, do not take this hood off of your head until you hear the bells of the cathedral ringing for the 6 o'clock chime, 6 o'clock in the morning. If you take it off before that time, some evil will befall you. Well, the mason agreed. He agreed that he would keep the hood on, and when he did, the priest laid into his hand a number of gold coins this night and quietly departed. And here now, the mason was left standing. We'll leave him here. We'll find out, does he keep that hood on until the 6 o'clock bells ring? Or does he take this hood off? And does some strange thing befall him? Okay, tomorrow I'll continue the story. Thank you for joining, and hope you have a good rest of your day.